Your plants produce steel, chemicals, automobiles, the stuff that literally built the modern world. Your headquarters? Germany. Yes, that Germany. The country that spent decades being synonymous with precision engineering, rock-solid reliability, and economic muscle. The industrial powerhouse of Europe. But now it's 2023. You walk through the factory gates one morning. What do you see? Silence. Dead silence. The production lines aren't moving. The machinery sits idle. Your plant is shut down. Why? Did your customers vanish? No, orders are still coming in. Are your workers on strike? Nope. The reason is far simpler and far more terrifying. You literally can't afford to turn the lights on anymore. Energy costs have exploded so violently that it's cheaper to lock the doors and send everyone home than to operate at a loss. Welcome to the reality of the Energiewende, the so-called energy transition. This was supposed to be humanity's glorious leap into a utopia powered by wind, sunshine, and a clean conscience. German policymakers threw more than $500 billion at this grand experiment. Think about that number for a moment. $500 billion. That's 12 zeros. That's buy a small country kind of money. So what did they get for this astronomical investment? The highest electricity prices in the developed world. A crumbling industrial base. And here's the darkest punchline of all. They're now tearing down wind farms to expand coal mines. You heard that right. They're demolishing renewable energy infrastructure to dig up more coal. Today, we're dissecting the most expensive, self-inflicted economic wound in modern history. We'll look at how a toxic mix of panic, ideological blindness, and political arrogance drove one of the world's great economic powers straight into a trap of its own making. Buckle up. This is going to be one expensive, bumpy ride. To understand how Germany drove itself off this cliff, we need to rewind to 2010. Feels like ancient history, doesn't it? The iPhone 4 had just launched. People were still doing weird dance moves, and in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, a trained physicist with a PhD in quantum chemistry, mind you, actually extended the operating licenses of the country's nuclear power plants. At that moment, Germany was sitting pretty. They had a balanced energy mix, nuclear, coal, and a growing share of renewables. Nuclear power was delivering roughly a quarter of the nation's electricity, clean, stable, affordable. The plan made sense. Use nuclear as a bridge fuel while gradually scaling up renewables over the course of decades. But then, March 11th, 2011 happened. An earthquake shook Japan. The Tohoku quake triggered a devastating tsunami that slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. It was a disaster, a tragedy, but it happened 5,000 miles away from Germany, in an earthquake-prone zone, at a facility designed in the 1960s. Germany, for the record, isn't exactly famous for massive tsunamis. Logic would suggest a safety review, right? Maybe check your backup systems, upgrade protocols. But politics doesn't run on logic, it runs on emotion. And the German public was terrified. The anti-nuclear movement, fueled by the Green Party, kicked into overdrive. They'd been protesting atomic energy since Chernobyl in the 80s, and this was their "we told you so" moment on steroids. So what did the physicist chancellor do? Did she look at the data? Did she calculate the baseload requirements of the world's fourth largest economy? Nope, she panicked. Or more accurately, made a cold political calculation to save her coalition. Days after Fukushima, Merkel announced the Atomausstieg, the nuclear phase-out. Germany would shut down all of its nuclear reactors by 2022. 8 plants were switched off immediately, just like that. Click, gone. This was the original sin of Germany's energy catastrophe. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you live in a house with a rock-solid furnace. Sure, it looks a little intimidating, but it keeps you warm, it's paid off, and it works flawlessly. You decide you want to go solar. Great idea. But instead of installing the panels first and then gradually phasing out the furnace, you grab a sledgehammer and smash the furnace to pieces. In the middle of winter. And then you say, "Don't worry, the sun will come out. Eventually." That's exactly what Germany did. They took 17 fully functional, zero-carbon power plants and threw them in the trash. Why is this a $500 billion disaster? Because building wind turbines costs money, sure. But building wind turbines to replace functioning nuclear plants is economic suicide. You're not adding capacity, you're just burning billions to stay in the same place. Between 2010 and 2020, Germany poured massive subsidies into the EEG, Renewable Energy Sources Act. Homeowners and businesses paid a surcharge on every kilowatt hour to fund this transition. Electricity prices in Germany skyrocketed to nearly 3 times the US average. And here's the kicker, the punchline nobody's laughing at. Despite spending hundreds of billions on renewables, Germany's carbon emissions barely budged for a decade. Why? Because when the wind stopped blowing and the sun stopped shining, which happens a lot in Northern Europe, they couldn't turn the nuclear plants back on. They were gone. So instead, they burned lignite coal, the dirtiest, nastiest fossil fuel on the planet. They killed the cleanest form of baseload power to save the environment and ended up relying on the filthiest rock in the ground. You can't make this stuff up. Alright, so you've destroyed your nuclear fleet. You've got a lot of wind and solar, but they're intermittent. You need backup for those dark, windless days the Germans call Dunkelflaute. If you want to eventually get off coal, what's your bridge fuel? Natural gas. It burns cleaner than coal, the turbines spin up fast, and it's perfect for industrial heat, which Germany desperately needs for chemicals and steel. But Germany doesn't have much gas of its own. Enter the dealer, Vladimir Putin. For decades, Germany operated under a policy called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. The idea was breathtakingly optimistic. If we buy enough gas from Russia, if we entangle our economies, Russia will eventually become a nice, liberal democracy. They won't go to war with their best customer, right? This led to the construction of Nord Stream 1 and then the planning of Nord Stream 2, massive pipelines running under the Baltic Sea, designed to pump cheap Siberian gas straight into the veins of German industry. It was a drug, and Germany was the addict. By 2021, Germany was importing 55% of its natural gas from Russia. Their entire manufacturing model, BASF, Bayer, Volkswagen, was built on the assumption that cheap Russian gas would flow forever. There were warnings. Oh, were there warnings? The Poles warned them. The Ukrainians screamed it from the rooftops. The Baltic states practically begged them to wake up. They said, "You're handing the Kremlin a kill switch for your economy." And let's not forget the most viral moment of all. In 2018, at the United Nations, then-President Donald Trump said, "Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course." The camera cut to the German delegation. They were smirking, chuckling, looking at each other like, "Can you believe this guy? He clearly doesn't understand sophisticated European diplomacy." Fast forward to February 2022. Russian tanks roll into Ukraine. The laughter stopped real quick. Suddenly, that sophisticated change through trade policy looked less like genius diplomacy and more like suicidal negligence. When the sanctions hit, when Russia throttled the gas flows, and when the pipelines mysteriously exploded, that's a whole other story. Germany was caught with its pants down in a blizzard. Gas prices didn't just go up, they went vertical. Spot market prices increased by 1,000% at the peak. Remember that factory owner from the beginning? Suddenly, his energy bill went from $1 million a month to 10 million. You can't absorb that. You can't pass that on to customers who can just buy steel from China or the US. So the German government had to scramble. They had to bail out utility giant Uniper to the tune of $30 billion just to keep the lights on. They had to spend hundreds of billions more subsidizing energy bills for citizens to prevent riots. This is where the trap snaps shut. Germany had shut down its nuclear plants, so no backup there. It had ideologically alienated itself from fossil fuels. And then, its main supplier of the one fuel it did allow, gas, turned into an enemy of the state. Robert Habeck, the Green Party's economic minister, oh, the irony, had to go on a humiliating world tour, literally bowing to the Emiratis, begging for LNG, liquefied natural gas, to replace the Russian pipeline gas. And here's the kicker. LNG is way more expensive than pipeline gas. It has to be cooled, shipped across oceans, and regasified. The era of cheap German manufacturing, likely gone forever. The competitive advantage that made Made in Germany a global brand, high quality at competitive prices, was secretly subsidized by cheap Russian hydrocarbons. Now that subsidy is gone, and the cracks in the foundation are turning into canyons. We're just getting started. In the next section, we'll look at the deindustrialization wave sweeping Europe and why major German companies are packing their bags and moving to Texas. If understanding how decisions like these ripple through to your own life and wallet matters to you, hit that subscribe button.
This channel breaks down stories like this without the boring jargon or bureaucratic spin. If you want to see the real human cost of this energy trap, don't look at a utility bill. Look at Ludwigshafen. This is the home of BASF, the largest chemical producer on the planet. This one site consumes about as much natural gas as all of Switzerland. For decades, this was the beating heart of German industry, turning cheap Russian gas into the fertilizers, plastics, and vitamins that the world depends on. But in 2023, the heart started skipping beats. BASF announced it was permanently downsizing in Europe. They cut 2,600 jobs at their flagship plant. They shut down one of their ammonia facilities. And where are they moving that investment? China. BASF is building a $10 billion state-of-the-art complex in Zhanjiang, China. Why? Because in China, energy is cheap, and the government isn't trying to guilt-trip you for using it. And they're not alone. It's a mass exodus. Miele, the company that makes those indestructible washing machines, announced they're moving production to Poland. Volkswagen is openly discussing building its next battery factories in Canada and the US, chasing the juicy subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. Economists have a polite term for this: structural change. I have a more accurate one: deindustrialization. Think about what this means. Germany is an export economy. It doesn't have Facebook or Google. It makes things, tangible goods. If you take away the ability to make things competitively, what's left? A really nice museum with excellent beer. The CEO of BASF, Martin Brudermüller, didn't mince words. He said, "Europe is becoming increasingly uncompetitive." That's CEO speak for "we're getting out before the ship sinks." This isn't just about rich shareholders losing money. This is about the high-paying, middle-class union jobs that hold a society together. When the steel mills close, they don't come back. When the chemical plants move to China, they stay in China. Germany is literally hollowing itself out to meet carbon targets that the rest of the world is ignoring. It's like setting your own house on fire to show the neighbors how serious you are about fire safety. Okay, let's get a little technical here, because this is where the incompetence truly shines. Germany has a geography problem. The wind blows in the north, where the ocean is. The factories are in the south, where BMW and Siemens are. To get power from point A to point B, you need massive high-voltage transmission lines. The biggest one is called Südlink. It was supposed to be the main artery of the energy transition. The original plan? Have it ready by 2022, just in time for the nuclear phase-out. The reality? It's stuck in bureaucratic hell. Due to endless lawsuits and NIMBY, not in my backyard protests, they had to agree to bury the cables underground, which tripled the cost and massively delayed the project. The new completion date? 2028. Maybe. So what happens today when a storm hits the North Sea and the wind turbines spin like crazy? You have too much power in the north and no way to send it south. The grid gets overloaded. To prevent a blackout, grid operators have to tell the wind farms to shut down. But here's the kicker. The wind farms still get paid. It's called redispatch, or as I call it, ghost power. German consumers are paying wind farms billions of euros not to produce electricity. In 2022 alone, the cost of this congestion management hit a record $4.2 billion. Let that sink in. You're paying for wind turbines to sit idle in the north. Meanwhile, because that power can't reach the south, the factories in Bavaria have to fire up. You guessed it, coal and gas plants to keep running. You're paying twice. Once for the green energy you didn't get, and once for the dirty energy you had to use instead. It's a Rube Goldberg machine of inefficiency.
And who pays for it? The German grandmother checking her mailbox and finding an electricity bill that's doubled in 3 years? We're halfway through this disaster story. Coming up next, the heat pump rebellion that nearly toppled the government, and the green Mirage that shows why emissions are dropping. Spoiler, it's not good news. If you're enjoying this breakdown of economic chaos, smash that like button. It tells the algorithm that people actually care about energy policy. And drop a comment. Would you install a heat pump if the government forced you to pay $30,000 for it? By 2023, the German government realized that shutting down nuclear and burning coal wasn't exactly helping their carbon footprint. They needed a new win. They needed to decarbonize your basement. Enter the Heizungsgesetz, the heating law. Green Party Economic Minister Robert Habeck pushed through legislation that effectively banned new oil and gas boilers starting in 2024. The replacement? Heat pumps. Now, don't get me wrong, heat pumps are amazing technology. They're basically air conditioners running in reverse, super efficient. But there's a catch. They work best in modern, well-insulated houses with underfloor heating. Know what most German houses are? Old, drafty, built with bricks thick enough to stop a tank, but terrible at holding heat. To make a heat pump work in a 1950s German house, you often need to rip up the floors, replace the radiators, and insulate the walls. The cost? It can easily run between $20,000 and $50,000. The government offered subsidies, sure, but the messaging was a disaster. It felt like forced expropriation. Grandma, living on a pension in her paid-off house, was suddenly told she might have to take out a loan just to stay warm next winter. The public reaction wasn't just anger, it was fury. The tabloid newspaper Bild ran headlines calling it the heat hammer, Heizhammer. Habeck's approval ratings fell off a cliff.
The far-right party, AfD, Alternative for Germany, surged in the polls, largely by saying, "We won't touch your boiler." It got so bad, the government nearly collapsed. They had to water down the law significantly, delaying deadlines and creating massive loopholes. But the damage was done. The heat pump industry, which had ramped up production expecting a boom, actually saw sales crash in 2024 because everyone was confused and terrified. People panicked and bought brand new gas boilers before the ban kicked in, locking in fossil fuel usage for another 20 years. It was a masterclass in how not to do policy. Instead of incentivizing the transition, they tried to mandate it overnight, ignoring the economic reality of their own citizens. Now, the German government will look at you and say, "But wait, our emissions are dropping. We hit our 2023 climate targets." And technically, they're right. In 2023, Germany's CO2 emissions dropped to the lowest level in 70 years. But why did they drop? Was it because of the amazing wind turbines? The heat pumps? No, it was because the factories stopped running. Energy-intensive production fell by nearly 20%. When you shut down steel mills, chemical plants, and paper factories, your emissions go down. Hooray! You saved the planet by destroying your economy. This is the equivalent of losing weight by cutting off your leg. Yes, the scale says you're lighter, but you're also bleeding out on the bathroom floor. The head of Germany's Federal Audit Office explicitly called this out. He said, "Germany is not on track for a sustainable transition. It's on track for an economic contraction that masquerades as climate success." And it gets worse. Because Germany shut down its nuclear plants, its electricity grid is now dirtier than its neighbour France. France gets 70% of its power from nuclear. Their carbon intensity is around 50 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Germany? Even on a good day, it hovers around 300 to 400 grams.
So when a German buys an electric car to save the planet, they're charging it with electricity that's 6 to 8 times dirtier than what a French person uses. The self-proclaimed green energy leader of Europe is actually one of the continent's biggest polluters, simply because they refuse to accept that nuclear energy is zero carbon. So here we are, late 2025. The German economy is stagnating. It was the only major G7 economy to shrink in 2023, and it barely moved in 2024. The German model, cheap energy in, high-quality exports out, is broken. The political landscape is fractured. The Green Party is fighting for its political life. The industries that made Germany rich are looking for exit strategies. And the world is watching. Developing nations like India and Vietnam are looking at Germany and saying, "Yeah, we're not doing that." They're building coal, they're building nuclear, they're prioritizing reliability and affordability over ideology. Germany wanted to be a role model, and they succeeded. They became the perfect example of what not to do. They showed the world that you cannot run a modern industrial economy on intermittent, weather-dependent energy alone. At least, not without a massive, reliable baseload backup. And if you destroy your clean backup, nuclear, before your new backup, batteries or hydrogen, is ready, you fall off the bridge. Is there a way out? Maybe. Germany still has incredible engineers. They have deep pockets. There's talk of restarting some nuclear plants, though the technical hurdles are massive. There's hope that hydrogen will eventually save the day. But the lesson for the rest of us is crystal clear. Energy policy cannot be built on wishful thinking. It requires physics, math, and cold, hard economics. If you let ideology drive the bus, don't be surprised when you drive it off a cliff. Germany spent $500 billion to learn this lesson. Hopefully, the rest of us can learn it for free. Thanks for watching.
If you found this deep dive valuable, check out the upcoming video where I break down why France is winning the energy war. It's the perfect sequel to this disaster story. And before you go, drop a comment. What do you think? Can Germany still turn this around? Or has the train already left the station? I'm genuinely curious to hear your take. See you in the next one.